Hey everybody, it's Gio, welcome back to my channel. Throughout Masters Reykjavik, there have been a lot of very insane games. And this is the first time we're getting to see all these teams from different regions go up against each other in an international LAN, and seeing the difference in playstyles and metas and whatnot come together and actually clash in person has been an absolute delight. One of my favorite games of this whole week so far was actually all the way back in day 2, and that was Liquid versus V1. And I think this game going into it had a lot of expectations. You know, not just because it's EU versus NA, but because V1, a lot of people had doubts that they would even qualify for this event. There's also the fact they've got a stand-in in the form of Jammies. Meanwhile, Team Liquid are generally considered one of, if not the best team in Europe and arguably the world. So there was a slight edge being given to Team Liquid, I feel. What I want to look at today is 3 of the attacking rounds that Team Liquid played on Ascent against V1, and this was the second map that they played of the series. In stage 2 of VCT, Liquid played Ascent 14 times, they had a 100% win rate and a 75% attacking win rate, and their primary composition was always Jett, Killjoy, Omen, Sova, and Phoenix, which is exactly what they played against V1. They still ended up losing it, actually. For me, there was a really interesting flow to the first half of this game, where Liquid really broadcast their intentions, and V1 adapted to the way that they were playing very quickly. Things like preventing Liquid from taking any mid control, or shutting down their opportunity to move into a site through 2 routes rather than just 1. They were also very effective at getting the opening kill, which shut down a lot of Liquid's attacking prowess. And it actually meant that V1 were able to play a ton of bonus rounds because they simply didn't need to buy more weapons. So the rounds that I picked out to talk about are rounds 5, 8, and 10. And after round 5, that's where Liquid started to pull things back in their favor on the attack. And we see how the adaptations that V1 were using against them were losing their efficacy. So let's start with round number 5. To set the scene on economy, this is the first round that V1 are actually spending properly. They've been bonusing up to this point, but here we're seeing an Operator and an Odin be bored, as well as more standard weapons. Liquid do finally have enough money to buy, but they can't full buy, and they're quite low on money. They do have a Blade Storm, so buying for Yampi is much less of a priority. Up until this point, Liquid have shown their preference for pushing mid, and also taking both A main and cubby/tree control for a 2-pronged A site push. V1 have very much placed their utility in a way that makes breaking A site very difficult. Stars in A main, nano swarms in tree, turret facing A main from site, and 2 players very close by in those locations. They've been playing this same Viper wall to cut off B main and mid market too, and they also have Penny up by defender spawn to physically hold mid as well. And with an Operator as well as Jett's utility, it's the ideal choice for that job. You can see how Liquid are setting themselves up that they want to be applying a lot of pressure to B main. It's not super common for them to all group up in the same place. Dark covers, recon dart, everything designed to facilitate that push. And not just that, but Yampi tailwinds forward, something he does a lot to engage rather than disengage. Yampi and Link are actually put on flank watch while Liquid look for the opening pick, which Cryptix finds with a wallbang. The Blade Storm flank watch towards Cubby is ideal for that longer range, while actual weaponry is used to look for the wallbangs. Once the opening pick has been found, this is Liquid's cue to start to act on their plan, which is using their lockdown to facilitate a push onto the site. Now, what this says to me is that they're kinda desperate, and you can see that they are. They have little money, no rounds on the board, they need what they can get. So using a lockdown for an engagement rather than a post plant is a big investment, but they wouldn't be making it if they felt like they had an alternative choice. The idea is that it drives the defenders off the site, it opens it up to the attackers, and they get a free plant. The thing is, the Viper wall goes up, making pushing from B main a risk anyway, especially as the defenders can still hold a line of sight from spawn outside of the lockdown. So by the time Liquid push, the lockdown has detained no one, and it disappears. Liquid have to use their dark covers, recon, and run it back to try and make this engagement. And while they make a slight push, the players in B main watching flank can be openly aggressed upon. So now it's a 2 versus 3, and V1 have all 3 of their ults. Liquid have used their lockdown, they don't have any option for post-plant ultimates. What V1 do is use their Cosmic Divide alongside their own lockdown. Now, this is smart, because they specifically placed the Cosmic Divide not just so that the attackers are trapped on site with no info as to where the defenders could aggress, but also just past the plant in a non-default spot, meaning that the attackers wouldn't know if a defuse was being made. They would have to push up through the Cosmic Divide into a man disadvantaged fight with no intel. Not just that, but with the looming threat of being detained, they have limited time in which to do it. It creates a very scrappy gunfight, which V1 win. Round 8. So by this point, the economy is actually really swung because Liquid have just won the last 2 rounds, so they're doing fine for money, but also they actually only need to buy 1 weapon anyway. V1, meanwhile, are force buying. They're spending every last credit on weapons and what armor they can. If they lose all of these weapons, they're boned for the next round. But lots of them are close to their ultimate, so they could potentially farm those. Again, the stars are out on A and B mains. Again, the Viper wall is out across B side and mid-market too. Interestingly, in a number of rounds, Jammies has used his wall far along enough that it actually cuts off tree as well. But this time he hasn't, and they've also not pre-placed any nanoswarms in tree like previously either. So when Liquid start to drone and push down A main, Zellsis can place that utility in the archway reactively. Liquid go for a calculated aggression onto the site, with Yampy's Tailwind and links from the shadows giving them a very fast A presence, removing the Killjoy turret and applying pressure from hell. The dark cover on tree door means Vanity can't really push forward, and either way he only has a judge. But this advantage is also aided by Scream's use of the Blaze Wall, which kinda gives them a safe route into the site from any LOS held from tree or heaven. I really like the plant location that they go for because it's not on the default spot, but they know that A main is clear, so the line of sight to A main isn't an issue. They know that no one's on heaven, and even if they were, they'd be at a risk of huge exposure if they tried to kill Zellsis. The one place they know is a huge risk is tree, so they specifically plant in a location where the LOS is blocked into tree. Link can hold that angle anyway, and Scream immediately gets ready with the curveball to throw up to heaven once the call is made that someone is pushing. Combine this with Yampy's location, and they can basically shut down any attempt V1 make from heaven. Not only is the likelihood of a retake super low, but V1 don't have the money to replace the weapons they'll lose if they die, so their only option is to play for their lives and run. Round 10. Once again, we're in a situation where V1 have to force buy, but I think it's also worth knowing that at this point in the game, they've used their tactical timeout. Meanwhile, Liquid have more money than they know what to do with and are barely touching any of it. There are a lot of ults to use, so there's definitely utility available on both sides. It's not clear through the fact that I'm literally just picking out a couple of rounds from this game, but over the course of the game so far up to this point, the way the opening engagements have gone has also changed. Originally, Yampy wasn't nailing them down, and a lot of them were going in the way to V1. However, at this point in the game, Yampy is actually being involved in a ton of them in the way that Liquid want him to be, and I think that that has also really helped change the flow and the momentum of the game so far. A similar defensive setup to V1's previous rounds, with stars in B and A main, Viper wall across mid, this time it is cutting off tree. They've put the Killjoy utility mostly in B this time, whereas previously a lot of it had been invested into A and tree. Once again, they have Penny up in the center of defender spawn to hold back a mid push. V1, interestingly, invest their Viper's Pit at the very start of the round. They place it in the archway so that it covers a portion of the A site and, crucially, A main. It makes A virtually a non-option for Liquid, which means they'll have to barrage through the entire setup of B. And it is very reminiscent of round 1, where Liquid brute forced their way up through mid-market and just burst onto the site. But that time it didn't go so well. This time, they forced Penny out of position with a recon, hold angles into defender spawn from safe corners, and use dark covers to prevent V1 having any angles in return. The tailwind in from Yampy with support from Cryptics ensures the opening kill. Soulcast recollects the spike from B lobby to push up B main, so already the multiple angled approach that they like has been secured. There's very little that Jammies and Vanity can do at this point, especially once the attacker lockdown goes down. They're not going to get any kills. Their economy is absolutely balked, so they once again have to stay alive. To me, this was a really interesting game purely from the fact that there was such expectation on Liquid, and V1 ensured that those expectations were actually superseded for a lot of the game. And the game did ultimately go in V1's favor. They got 13-11 on this particular map. And a lot of those rounds came from the first half of their defending side. I found it really interesting to see with how much confidence Team Liquid played their original approach at the start of this game, then struggled to go against V1's adaptations, and then suddenly change things partway through to basically make those adaptations null and void. And I think a lot of that came from things like ensuring that they stayed together on a lot of their approaches at the very start of the round. They committed to their aggressive pushes a bit more, always ensured that there was support for those pushes as well, rather than just sending Yampy in on his own to die with nothing that you can do about it after that. They learned where it is that V1 like to apply the pressure from, and they ensured that they targeted that before they went in for any actual full engagements onto the sites as well. I would have loved to have done a video where I talk about way more of the rounds than just these ones. And actually, I had a list of the number of rounds I wanted to speak about, and I was like, I've got to cut this one. I've got to cut it down. I've got to cut it down. Ultimately, though, this was my first attempt at making any kind of Valorant analysis video. So please let me know what you guys thought, because I really enjoy doing this kind of thing. I love analyzing. I freaking love Valorant. I'm obviously casting it now, so I would love to hear your feedback and your thoughts. I currently have Liquid versus Fnatic up on my laptop right now while I'm filming and waiting to see how that's going to go, so you know. So thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you very soon in the next video. Maybe it'll be about Siege, maybe it'll be about Valorant. Who freaking knows? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon. Goodbye.